Nothing changes in our life until we change. That's the end of the story. And a lot of people think they can stay the same person and that their life will change, and it doesn't work that way. So I started looking closely at our personality, how we think, how we act, how we feel. And is it possible if a person changes the way they think, the way they act, and the way they feel, if they change their personality, will it change their personal reality? Will it change their health? Rehearse new ways of being in our mind and begin to teach our body emotionally what a future event will feel like before it happens. If the environment signals the gene according to epigenetics and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, could we signal genes ahead of the environment? Is that what these people did, and is that what I did? So I did my best to demystify the process and use it on people to see how if they could change. And for the first couple of years, not a whole lot happened. I mean, people felt better at the end of a workshop, and then after a couple of years, we started seeing people step out of wheelchairs, and we started seeing people cancers go into remission right in a weekend event. And that's when I knew that I had to start measuring. And that's when I knew I had to really look to see what was going on in the brains of these people. So I assembled a team of scientists and researchers. We've measured over 12,000 brains now, maybe even more than that. And I wanted to see people's brains before they came to an event, put them through the rigor of transformation, keep them in the same environment, give them the right information, have them understand what they're doing, understand why they're doing it, use science as the language to demystify the process so the how gets easier, and assign meaning to it. And if you can put intention and meaning behind it, could we get better results? And so we want to also scan brains in real time. I wanted to see your brain, Glenn's brain, in a meditation when he is either overthinking and overanalyzing, or he's learning how to suppress his analytical mind and get into the operating system where those subconscious programs exist. And the word meditation, really one of the important elements is to teach people how to self-regulate and create more coherence and change their brain waves so they can really begin to reprogram themselves. Living in stress is living in survival. Mm-hmm. And survival is a very primitive mechanism that allows us to really adapt to an environment that's threatening or dangerous. The moment you perceive a danger or a threat, you switch on an autonomic function in your body, the sympathetic nervous system, and there's an arousal. The arousal of those hormones causes a heightening of the senses, because now we want to become more acute that there's a danger there. If there's a tiger in the bushes and you hear something rumbling around and it's night, you're going to either run, fight, or freeze, or hide. That's your choices. And so that works really well in survival for the short term, because the arousal causes us feeling like we're more our body. We get a rush of energy. The arousal causes our brain waves to change and to move into a more alert state. We narrow our focus on what it is in the environment. We're giving it our attention, all of our attention. And now we're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future based on what we've known in the past. So we're overlaying a known into the future so that we can prepare. And normally when we don't know what it is, the unknown causes us to feel these primitive emotions of survival, and it's best to run. It's best to fear the unknown. So the challenge becomes that works really well for the short term. But when you switch on this system and you're mobilizing enormous amounts of the body's energy and resources for some threat in your outer world, there's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. And we start tapping the body's vital resources, and that's what creates mental health or physical health or spiritual disease, right? So because no organism can live in that emergency state for that extended period of time. It's like there's a hurricane coming through Australia, you're not going to be thinking about remodeling your kitchen at that time. It's not a time for long-term projects, right? So now when we're in stress and we're in survival, the self is the most important. You don't trust, it's not a time to love, it's not a time to learn, it's not a time to communicate, it's not a time to be vulnerable, it's not a time to open your heart, it's not the time to sit down and close your eyes and go within. You would be eaten. The survival gene is switched on, and people spend 70% of their time living in this state. So then in that state where the arousal takes place, the brain moves into a heightened brainwave pattern called beta brainwave pattern. Now, as I said, that's like driving your sports car in first gear on the freeway. It's the jump start, but you can't do it for a long period of time because in stress is signaled by the loss of control, not being able to predict the next moment, the unknown, or the perception that something's going to get worse. And when you're in that state, you start trying to control and predict everything in your life, and you shift your attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place, to another object, to a group of situations. And every one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain. So the arousal causes the brain, like a lightning storm in the clouds, to start firing out of order. It starts firing incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. When the brain isn't working right, we're not working right. So then now the person is aroused in that state. It's never occurred to them that they could change that. In fact, they're telling you, I am this way because of my boss, because of my ex, because of my past, because of the news, because of the global situation, whatever it is. And what they're really saying is, I'm using something in my outer environment to validate or justify why I feel this way. So then that means then they're also going to be dependent on something in their outer environment to make them feel better. Whether it's a drug or a treatment or whatever it is, complaining, whatever it is that makes them feel better. And the moment they notice that they've done something and they've used something outside of them to make that feeling go away, they'll pay attention to what it was. And every time they feel that feeling, they'll become dependent on it. So now they're more dependent on their environment. So then the subconscious program is, when things are good, you feel good. But when things are bad, you feel bad. So you're completely victim to your environment. And the environment is actually controlling the way you feel and think. Now, anything that controls the way you feel and think, you're victim too. So I say, Glenn, why are you in such a bad mood? Well, I'm in a bad mood because of this person, this circumstance, this situation in my life. What you're really saying is, something in my outer environment is literally controlling my feelings, my emotions, and my thoughts. So then it turns out that when the person is in that state and they're in that aroused state, their heart is beating because the sympathetic nervous system switched on, but they're not running. They're not fighting, they're not hiding, they're stepping on the gas pedal and they're stepping on the brake. And the heart starts beating very incoherently. And incoherent waves in the brain and incoherent waves in the heart diminish energy. So energy goes out of the brain, energy goes out of the heart, we stop thinking clearly, we stop rationalizing very well, we can't plan for the future. We're uninspired. In our heart, we don't trust, we can't feel gratitude, we can't feel appreciation, we can't feel love. It's not a time to feel any of those things. So then that's the beginning of disease, right? So the person starts thinking about their problems and they turn on that stress response just by thought alone. And if the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease, then your thoughts are going to make you sick. And the question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts can make you well? And by the same means, if you're using every person, every circumstance in your life to reaffirm that dependency on that rush of emotions, then you become addicted to the life you don't even like. That's why change is so hard, because you'd rather suffer and be in pain than take a chance in the unknown, because the unknown, you can't predict it. So people cling to the familiar and cling to the known, and so they become dependent on the environment. So what we found out was, is there a way to make the brain more coherent? Is there a formula that we can teach people? Instead of narrowing their focus on the material world, narrowing their focus on everything known, what if they broaden their focus and they put it on nothing, on space? If they broaden their focus and they open their awareness in this way, what happens to the brain? And we found the brain gets really organized. What if they traded fear for an elevated emotion and we taught them how to start working with their body? Now here's the answer to your question. You practice that long enough, you close your eyes, you're not distracted by your environment, you're sitting down, you're not eating, you're not talking, you're not watching TV, you're not on your cell phone, you're not smelling, you're not tasting, you're not feeling with your body, you're sitting still. You're not thinking about your schedule or what you got to do or what happened yesterday, and you're working with the body and you're understanding the process. You keep settling the body down when it's aroused. You keep watching your body wanting to get up and do something, you keep bringing it back. And you're training your body to a new mind. It turns out if you keep practicing this, the body finally surrenders to a new mind, and there's a liberation of energy, and the person releases a little of that anger. They release a little bit of that fear, and the body can relax more into the present moment, and energy moves into the heart. We've measured this so many times. Once some energy makes it to the heart informs the brain. It's safe to create. It's safe to think about a possibility of how to get out of this situation. So then, it's really good to do it with your eyes closed when there's soft music playing in the background and you're relaxed and your eyes are closed and you're in a safe environment. But that's training. Because when it matters the most is when it's the hardest to do. And I don't like that answer at all, but it's the absolute truth. I mean, when you're the most frustrated, when you're the most impatient, when you're the most agitated, when you're the most in the most amount of pain, is it possible then to dial down those survival emotions and practice getting back in your heart, to shorten the refractory period of your emotional reactions? Because when you're living in those emotions, there's always a gap between the way things appear and the way things really are.
Yeah.
And if you act during that time, and you do something, you make a choice during that time, you'll always say the same thing. I should have never said that. I should have never sent that email. I never sent that text, because you were altered in some way. And that's when people knee-jerk, right? So in our events in the past, we've seen people sustain this kind of coherence in their brain and heart for 45 minutes to an hour. They know how to do it. But now the next step is to put them in a situation where they normally would feel fear or some survival emotion, and instead of throwing in a program and rushing and going unconscious, teaching them how to self-regulate. So you put someone on a post 50 feet in the air, they're, I don't know, 25 meters up there, and you get somebody, or 20 meters up there, you get somebody standing on that post, and they're wearing a heart rate monitor, and it's not whether they succeed or fail, it's whether they can practice slowing that state down. And if they can do it there, they'll do it really well in their life. So then when everybody else is in fear, you seem to be calm and present. When everybody else is angry and impatient, you seem to be relaxed and poised, So we now know that learning how to move from that state of survival to that state of creation is a skill, and it takes practice. And when we do that and we're triumphant, we're no longer part of that same consciousness. We're in a different consciousness. And that is what gives people permission. When they observe you, they'll say, Glenn, you're really different than everybody else. Something's different about you, because you're not showing up like the collective. You're showing up in a different way, and that gives them permission to try it out as well. And I think that the biggest thing is that we can't face these challenges and this chaos in the same emotions that has actually created them. We can't live in fear. We can't be hostile. We can't be prejudiced. We can't be segregated. We can't be impatient. We can't demonstrate. That's all the stuff that's unraveling right now. And we have to really demonstrate order, coherence, and give people, the permission, in a sense, on some level, to do the same. So I'm a work in progress, and for me, if I'm alive the next day, I got another chance at life, and I always ask myself, just really like the same questions in the beginning of the day. Who do I want to be? And who do I not want to be? And if I could sit down and remind myself how I'm not going to think, how I'm not going to act, how I'm not going to speak, how I'm not going to feel, and become so conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body that I would not fall prey to them the entire day, that's a victory. And that's going from to a greater level of understanding about myself. And if I said to myself, who do I want to be when I open my eyes? And how do I want to live this day? What thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And I start firing and wiring them with intention and attention, I'm going to put new hardware in my brain. And if I keep doing it enough times, the hardware is going to be a software program, and that's going to be the new voice in my head that says, Joe, you can do it, or be patient, or be kind, or whatever. If I said, how do I want to be in my staff meetings, on my Zoom calls? How do I want to be with my children? How do I want to be with my friends? How do I want to be when I'm alone, when I'm in traffic, when I'm rushing? How is there another way to be? It turns out if you can close your eyes and rehearse mentally how you're going to be in that day, if you're truly present, the brain doesn't know the difference between what's going on in your outer world and what you're imagining. The brain is literally having the experience, and experience enriches circuitry in the brain. So you're installing hardware. Keep rehearsing it. The hardware becomes a software program, and who knows, you just may start acting that way automatically. That's the name of the game, and you become familiar with it. And if you said, God, what is my weak point? What is my weak emotion? Where do I default to in my life? Do I get impatient? Do I get angry? Do I get disrespectful? Okay, if I could today teach my body emotionally how I want to feel, and I got to remember this feeling, and I got to keep my attention on it, I got to keep it alive with my awareness and feel the feelings of my future before it happens. And if I can maintain this modified state of mind and body my entire day, independent of any condition in my environment, any drive, any need, any emotion, any habit in my body, and independent of time, I can sustain it. There should be something weird or something unusual or something new to show up in my life. And then at the end of my day, I could say in my imperfectly perfect self, how'd you do? How'd you do today? You know, how did you do? Where did you fall from grace? Where did you lose it? How could you do it better tomorrow? And if you could come up with an answer, what would love do? What would greatness look like? Remind yourself that. I think that would demystify the process of really falling in love with yourself and falling in love with life.